In the early months of the year 49, a man in his 50s stepped off a ship at Ostia after 8 years of exile on the island of Corsica, returning to a Rome that had moved on without him. He was greeted not by triumph, but by an assignment. He was to tutor a 12-year-old boy named Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, the son of the new empress, a boy the world would later know as the Emperor Nero. Seneca, who had spent nearly a decade contemplating the wasted years of others, while his own years drained into the Corsican wind, was now being handed back his time on a condition he did not yet understand. The condition was this: the years restored to him would not belong to him. They would belong to the household of the Caesars, to the moods of a child who would become a man capable of ordering his teacher's death, to the long obligation of advising power. And so, the philosopher, who would later write the most piercing essay ever composed on the brevity of life, received his life back, and almost immediately began to lose it again, more quickly and more completely than he had lost it on the island. Of all the things a Stoic counts, Seneca counted time most carefully. He counted it because he understood, with a clarity that few before or after him have matched, that time is the only possession a human being truly owns, and the only one that is ceaselessly being stolen. The essay we are concerned with today is called De Brevitate Vitae, on the shortness of life. Seneca wrote it as a letter to his father-in-law Paulinus, who held the office of Praefectus Annonae, the official responsible for Rome's grain supply. Paulinus had spent his career managing the calories of a city. Seneca, with the gentle severity of a man writing to family, asked him to consider whether he had ever managed his own days with the same care. The essay opens with a complaint. Seneca says he has heard from nearly everyone. People complain that life is short. They complain that nature has been ungenerous, that the span allotted to mortals is cruelly brief, that even the great die before their work is done. To this complaint, Seneca offers a correction that has the force of a slap. It is not that we have a short time to live, he writes in the translation that has come down to us, but that we waste much of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. But when it is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced at last, by death's final constraint, to realize that it has passed away before we knew it was passing. Notice what Seneca is doing here. He is not consoling. He is not saying, "Do not worry, you have plenty of time." He is saying the opposite of what we expect a philosopher to say to the grieving and the anxious. He is saying that the grief is misdirected. The problem is not the shortness of life. The problem is the spending of it. The principle, then, is this: time is the only true currency a human being possesses. Property can be replaced. Reputation can be restored. Even health, within limits, can be recovered. But an hour spent is an hour gone, and no force in the universe will return it. We are told by Seneca, again and again across the essay, that we treat this one irreplaceable currency as if it were the most disposable. No one, he writes, will give back the years. No one will restore you to yourself. Life will follow the path it began to take, and will neither reverse nor check its course. It will make no noise. It will not remind you of its swiftness. Silent, it will glide on. It will make no noise. This is the heart of the matter. Money, when it is stolen, leaves a mark. A house, when it burns, sends up smoke. But time, the most valuable of all our possessions, is taken from us soundlessly, hour after hour, by our own consent, while we look elsewhere. To understand why Seneca pressed this point with such urgency, we must understand the life he was pressing it from. And here we must walk, briefly, into the rooms where he wrote. Lucius Annaeus Seneca was born in Corduba, in the province of Hispania, around the year 4 before the Common Era. His father, Seneca the Elder, was a prosperous rhetorician, a man who had cultivated his connections and his speech with equal care. The family moved to Rome while Lucius was still a child, and there he was educated in rhetoric and philosophy, drawn from an early age toward the Stoic school, but also reading widely among the Pythagoreans and the Cynics. He came of age in a city where philosophy and politics had become inseparably tangled and where neither could be practiced safely. Tiberius was emperor when he was a young man. Caligula followed. Caligula, we are told by Suetonius, hated Seneca's style of oratory, calling it sand without lime, and at one point ordered his death, sparing him only because a woman of the court whispered that the philosopher was already consumptive and would die soon enough on his own. That woman, whoever she was, gave Seneca the first of his extra lives. He would receive several. Under Claudius, in the year 41, he was accused of adultery with the emperor's niece, Julia Livilla. The charge was almost certainly political. He was banished to Corsica, where he would spend 8 years. Corsica in the 1st century was not the holiday island of later imagination. It was a rocky place, sparsely populated, considered by the Roman elite to be the edge of the civilized world. Seneca, accustomed to libraries and salons and the constant rustle of intelligent conversation, found himself among shepherds and the wind. He wrote 2 consolations during this exile, one to his mother, Ad Helvium, urging her not to grieve for him, arguing that a philosopher's mind cannot truly be exiled because it carries its homeland inside it. The other, Ad Polybium, written to a powerful freedman of Claudius, was less philosophical and more transparently political, a piece of flattery aimed at securing recall. The 2 essays, sitting side by side in the corpus, tell us something honest about Seneca. He was a man of high principle and practical desperation, often in the same week. The recall came in 49, arranged by Agrippina, Claudius's new wife, who needed a tutor of reputation for her son. Seneca returned to Rome, was made praetor, and entered the household of imperial power. He would remain there for 15 years. Those years made him rich. Tacitus tells us, with the careful contempt of a senatorial historian, that Seneca accumulated a fortune of 300 million sesterces. He owned estates across Italy. He owned vineyards. He lent money at interest, and some ancient sources claim, perhaps unfairly, that one of his loan recalls helped provoke the rebellion of Boudica in Britain. The philosopher of restraint lived in considerable luxury, and his contemporaries noticed. This is the contradiction we cannot avoid. The man who wrote that we waste our lives on heedless luxury was a man surrounded by heedless luxury. The man who wrote that no one will give back the years served as a senior advisor, the most year-stealing court in Roman history. Seneca knew this. He wrote in another essay that he was not a wise man, but a man trying to be one, an invalid offering directions to other invalids. He did not claim to have escaped the disease he was diagnosing. He claimed only to see it. In the year 62, Having watched Nero descend from a tutorable boy into a murderous young emperor, Seneca tried to retire. He went to the palace and asked to be allowed to return his vast estates and withdraw into private study. Nero refused, embracing him with what Tacitus calls calculated warmth. The philosopher was permitted to withdraw partially, to spend more time at his villas, to write, but he remained inside the orbit of the court and inside its danger. It was in these last years, between roughly 62 and 65, that he wrote the great series of moral letters to his friend Lucilius, the Epistulae Morales, 124 letters that constitute the most sustained piece of Stoic ethics in Latin. In these letters, and in the essays of the period, the question of time presses constantly. He had received his life back from Caligula by accident, from Corsica by political maneuver, and from Nero by sufferance. He knew by now how easily it could be taken again. In 65, after the discovery of the Pisonian conspiracy against Nero, he was accused, almost certainly without sufficient evidence, of complicity. Nero ordered him to die. He opened his veins in a hot bath, surrounded by friends to whom he dictated final words in the manner of Socrates, whom he had admired all his life. Tacitus's account of the death is one of the most carefully composed passages in Latin literature, and it should be read, when you have time, in full. The man who had written so much about time died at the hour his student appointed. Let us now return to the essay, and to what Seneca actually says about how time is taken from us. He does not say it is taken by death. He says it is taken almost entirely by us. In the opening pages of De Brevitate Vitae, he draws up a catalogue of the time thieves. There are those whose lives are consumed by avarice, who labor endlessly for wealth they will not enjoy. There are those who waste themselves in ambition, attending the houses of the powerful at dawn, bowing in atriums, walking behind litters. There are those given to drink, those given to lust, those given to litigation. There are those who travel constantly because they cannot bear their own company. There are those whom Seneca calls with particular sharpness the occupati, the busy ones, who run from task to task with such momentum that they never pause to ask whether any of it is being done for their own life or for someone else's. The greatest hindrance to living, he writes, is expectancy, which depends upon the morrow and wastes today. You dispose of that which lies in the hands of fortune. You let go that which lies in your own. Whither do you look? At what goal do you aim? All things that are still to come lie in uncertainty. Live straightway. Live straightway. Statim viv. 2 words in Latin, a whole way of orienting a life in translation. Seneca extends the argument with an observation that I want you to consider carefully because it is the hinge of the essay. He writes that people are absurdly protective of their property. They will not let a stranger occupy a foot of their land. They will sue over a contested coin. They guard their grain stores, their wine cellars, their account books. But when it comes to time, which is the only possession of which it is honorable to be greedy, they give it away to anyone who asks. They give hours to dinner invitations they do not want. They give afternoons to people they do not respect. They give years to occupations they entered by accident and continued out of habit. Men do not let anyone seize their estates, and if the slightest dispute arises about boundaries, they rush to stones and arms, but they allow others to encroach upon their lives. Nay, they themselves even lead in those who will eventually possess them. No one is to be found who is willing to distribute his money, yet among how many does each one of us distribute his life? Read that sentence again in your mind. Among how many does each one of us distribute his life? Not money, not estates. The life itself, parceled out in small portions to people who will never repay and who do not even know they are receiving. Seneca was writing this, remember, in a city where the morning salutatio was a social institution. Clients walked across Rome before dawn to stand in the atria of patrons, to receive a small payment and a brief acknowledgement, and to follow that patron through his day. Time for the Roman client was literally currency, exchanged for protection and small sums. Seneca saw the pattern in this and extended it. We are all clients of something. We are all, most of us, standing in someone's atrium at dawn, without having decided that this is where our morning should be spent. He saves his sharpest passages for the powerful, not the poor. The poor, he says, at least know that their time has been taken from them. They feel the theft. The powerful, the busy, the occupati are convinced that their occupation is their life, and they reach the end without ever having lived a day for themselves. He gives examples. Augustus, the founder of the empire, who in his letters longed for retirement and never achieved it. Cicero, perpetually entangled in the politics he both hated and could not leave. Livius Drusus, who lamented as a young man that he had never had a holiday and died, perhaps by his own hand, in the middle of an unfinished political project. These are not failures of bad men. These are failures of busy men, men who were doing what their station required, men whose calendars were filled with what looked like meaningful obligation. Seneca's point is not that they should have worked less. His point is that they were never the owners of their work. The work owned them. And at the end, they discovered that the long life they thought they had been building had passed without their attendance. Against the occupati, Seneca sets a different figure, the man who has dedicated himself to philosophy, which for Seneca means the man who has dedicated himself to thinking about how to live. Only such a man, he says, truly lives long, because he extends his life in two directions. He extends it forward by attending to the present, rather than letting it run past him unnoticed. And he extends it backward by recovering the past through study, by living in conversation with the great minds of all the ages. Of all men, they alone are at leisure who take time for philosophy. They alone really live, for they are not content to be good guardians of their own lifetime only. They annex every age to their own. All the years that have gone before them are an addition to their store. This is one of the most beautiful arguments in the essay. The philosophical life is long, Seneca says, because it is not bounded by one's own birth. To read Zeno is to live in part with Zeno. To converse with Socrates is to add some of Socrates' years to one's own. The life of the mind, attentively pursued, is a long life by addition, and the life of the occupatus, however many years it occupies, is a short life because almost none of it is inhabited. Let us now slow down and ask what Seneca is actually teaching you, not what he is observing about Roman patronage, but what the principle requires of you here, today, listening. He is teaching, first, that time is property. This is the foundational reframing of the essay, and once it is made, the rest follows. If time were just a medium in which life happens, it could not be wasted. But Seneca insists it is a possession, given to you in a finite quantity, drawn down with every breath. To say, "I have plenty of time," is to make a claim about your wealth that you cannot verify. You do not know how much you have. You only know it is being spent. Second, he is teaching that the spending is mostly invisible. The thief of time does not break a window. He is admitted at the front door, smiling, as a friend. The dinner you did not want to attend. The conversation you continued out of politeness for 2 hours longer than your interest justified. The work assigned to you that you completed not because it mattered to you, but because you could not bring yourself to say that it did not. These are not catastrophes. They are the ordinary texture of a life. Seneca's claim is that they add up, and that the addition is the whole of most lives. Third, he is teaching that the remedy is not retreat. It would be easy to read De Brevitate Vitae and conclude that Seneca recommends withdrawal from all obligation, a flight to the country, a refusal of all duty. He does not. He himself did not. The remedy is not the absence of activity, but the presence of attention. The question is not, "Am I doing something?" but "Am I the one who has chosen to be doing this? And would I choose it again now, knowing what it costs?" The currency metaphor, when held carefully, can do real work for you. When you spend money, you generally know roughly what you are spending and roughly what you are getting. You do not hand a sum to a stranger who does not even ask for it. Seneca is asking you to bring the same alertness to your time that you bring automatically to your wallet. Not anxious counting, just basic awareness of the transaction. There is a further point that I think is the deepest in the essay, and it is the point most often missed by readers who come to Seneca looking for productivity advice. He is not telling you to fill your hours. He is telling you the opposite. The occupati, the busy ones, are the ones he pities most. A full calendar is not a long life. A long life is a present life, and the present life requires emptiness, requires room, requires the capacity to sit with one's own mind without immediately filling the silence. While we are postponing, he writes, life speeds by. Nothing is ours except time. We were entrusted by nature with the ownership of this single thing, so fleeting and slippery that anyone who will can oust us from possession. Anyone who will can oust us from possession. The phrase deserves to sit with you for a moment. The thief of your time is not always a person. Sometimes it is a habit. Sometimes it is a screen. Sometimes it is your own refusal to decide what you want, which makes you available to whatever wants you. Seneca does not moralize about this. He simply names it. There is one more thing the essay teaches, and it is perhaps the most consoling thing in Seneca. He does not say it is too late. The man who is 50, who has spent his life in distraction, in occupation, in obligations he did not choose, is not condemned to continue. Seneca says, in effect, that the moment you become aware of the spending, you have already begun a different kind of life. The hour in which you ask the question is the first hour you have truly owned. He writes that life is divided into 3 periods: that which has been, that which is, and that which is to come. The first is past and cannot be touched. The third is uncertain and cannot be possessed. Only the second, the present, is ours, and the occupatis have given it away. To withdraw the gift, even partially, even now, is to recover the only part of life that was ever recoverable. He who devotes every moment to the care of his own life, who orders every day as if it were his last, neither longs for nor fears the morrow. So I leave you, as Seneca leaves Paulinus, with a question. Not a demand, not an exhortation, but a question that you may carry with you for the rest of this day, and perhaps further. Of the hours you have spent in the last week, how many were spent by you, and how many were spent by someone else who was using your hours as their own? Take the question slowly. It is not meant to produce guilt, which Seneca would have considered another waste of time. It is meant only to produce the small, clear knowledge of where the currency went. You may find that more of it was well spent than you feared. You may find that some of it was given freely, in love, in service, in friendship, and that this is not theft at all, but the proper use of a portion of one's life. You may also find that some of it was simply gone, and that you cannot account for it, and that the inability to account for it is the precise thing Seneca was writing about. If you find the latter, the question is what to do with the next hour, not the next year, not the next decade, the next hour, which is the only piece of time over which you have any real authority. Seneca died in his 68th year, at the order of a student he had failed to improve, having written more about the wise use of time than perhaps any other ancient author, and having spent much of his own time, by his own admission, less wisely than he advised. This is not an argument against him. It is the reason to listen to him. He was not writing from above. He was writing from inside the same condition you are in. He was writing at the end with the hours he had left, knowing exactly what they were worth. Live straightway, he said. Statim viv. The hour in which you began listening to this is now nearly gone. What you do with the next one is, for the moment, still yours to decide.